Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. This video will be about trying to do a low save, or the other possibility is landing out. If you'd like more information about our club, just go to texassoaring.org for more information about the Glider Club. This is the PW5 that we have. Our club has 3 of these, and can you believe it? It's only $20 an hour to fly. That's just an amazing deal. Tow will cost you about $30. The PW5 makes an excellent cross-country trainer. It's a one-seater, has a 44-foot wingspan. The cruising speed is between 30 and never exceed of 140 miles an hour. It weighs about 400 pounds empty and about 660 maximum gross weight. The glide ratio is about 32 to 1, which means if you were a mile high, you could glide 32 miles. Another way to look at it, and we use a more conservative number, is for every 1,000 feet of altitude, we can fly 3 miles. That's conservative enough for your cross-country training. And this is the Pawnee. This is what we use for aero tows, and we have several of these available. This information I'll be displaying in real time. I'm using a GPS data logger and adding it to this video to make these really cool effects. On the left-hand bottom, that's our ground speed, not airspeed, so don't get that confused. GPS can only calculate ground speed. Moving up to the top center, that's our compass heading. Moving to the right corner, that's our rate of climb indicator as measured in feet per minute. And on the bottom is the altimeter. We set the altimeter above sea level, and TSA is about 660 feet above sea level. So in this example, you would subtract 600 feet. So roughly, I'm about 865 feet above the ground. This will be my 3rd year flying gliders at TSA. I got a glider add-on to my private pilot. And when you get your glider rating, does that make you an expert flying gliders? Of course not. It can take years of practice to get to a very high level of flying, especially in cross country. I've asked a lot of people, what is a glider license or a private pilot license? You know what it is? It's a license to learn. So if you're going to start flying gliders, typically you'll fly with an instructor for a while. Once you get proficient enough, you'll solo. And when you're flying solo, the objective will be to fly as long as you can. So when you're flying solo, you're going to get more experience in flying. You're going to get more familiar with your area. You're going to learn about airports that may be out of gliding range, but the next goal will be flying cross country, and that's where you're going to get a lot of training. I guarantee it. So what does a cross country flight mean? Well, for me, it means getting out of gliding range of your home base. That to me means you're flying cross country. And it may not be that far out, but that's just all, again, part of your training. As part of your cross-country training, you're going to learn how to land out safely in a field, or maybe a grass strip. You're going to learn about appropriate patterns, noting the slope of the ground, the surface, obstacles, and wind. And the next step is to stop soaring and start landing, among other things that are important. Here's some of the numbers we use when we're flying cross country. If we're 3,000 feet above the ground, you just want a general landing area. The next level is at 2,000 feet above the ground, and at that altitude you want a specific place to land. The next number we use is 1,500 feet above the ground, and you might have an alternate landing spot when you get to that point. When I'm getting low, I like to try to be upwind of my designated landing area. So if I find a thermal, I can start circling into it and drifting downwind over my landing spot that I've got. But sometimes you won't be able to get upwind of the landing area. I've been on the downwind side of it, and you just have to do an abbreviated pattern or a straight-in approach. Just depends. Every land out's going to be different. So what altitude do you use above ground before you decide to stop thermaling and start focusing on landing? For me, it's about 800 feet above the ground. Another thought was, if you can lose 200 feet and it doesn't adversely affect where you're going to land, you could go for it. But again, my cutoff is about 800 feet above the ground. The one thing I've learned is, as you get lower, the thermals are much smaller in diameter, and it makes it very difficult to stay in one. Another idea is you're getting low to the ground. If you find zero sink, let's say you find a thermal, but it's just maintaining your altitude and you're low, well, you just stay in that thermal. You don't go looking for something else, because that thermal could generate into something much stronger. And I've even had it go up to 600 feet a minute after a few minutes flying within that zero sink lift. So let's go through my thought process as I start working my way down here. Obviously, I'm very close to the airport, and I'm trying to see if I can locate this thermal that sometimes you can find part of it. You climb on one side of it and then descend on the other. But again, I've got my way out. One possibility is I could land downwind if I had to, or two, I could do an abbreviated pattern, which simply means I may not have an exact downwind, a base, and a final. It may not be all exact, but the objective is you'll land back at the airport safely. So at this point, I'm upwind of the airport, which is a good place to be, so I can drift downwind if I do find this thermal, and stay very close to TSA, the runway. So I'm working this thermal just a little bit, and of course, this low to the ground, I'm not finding the center of it. So part of it I'm climbing, and then on the other side I'm probably descending, but I'm still above my 1,500 feet cutoff. So it looks like I've gained about 100 feet or so as I'm circling. But again, I'm prepared and ready to land back at TSA if all else fails. I've got to have that safe out. And you can practice this, because it is safe as long as you've got your landing spot picked out. And of course, here I've got the TSA grass area or the runway to use. So I'm continuing to circle, and it looks like I've gained a little over maybe 150 feet of altitude. And again, I'm still drifting downwind. Of course, I've got one eye out there on the runway. Not that big of a deal just yet. So again, part of your training will be to fly in any available lift that you can find, especially when you're low. And as you get lower, the odds of you getting a low save, as we call it, diminish very quickly. So right now I'm about 850 feet above the ground, and I'm still go for at least one more 360-degree turn, and that will take about 40 seconds to make that turn. So it looks like very soon I'm going to stop trying to thermal and focus on landing, but I'm trying to work it. I got just a little bit more altitude here that I can burn off and still make it safely back to TSA. So this low save attempt is obviously something that you can try as long as you do it safely. You definitely don't want to get too low, like 500 feet above the ground, and try a low save. I'm not going to do it anyway, and you shouldn't either. But if you're at 800 feet as a cutoff, that's acceptable anyway. And maybe with less training, maybe you'll use a higher number. Maybe it's 1,000 feet above the ground as your cutoff. But as you get more experience, you can work it down a little bit. All right, I'm still getting lower, and at this point, this is the time to terminate trying to work that thermal and focus on landing. And that's just exactly what I'm going to do, as you'll see it right here. I'm going to level the wings on about the downwind side. I'm a little bit further out, but that's okay. And I'll even do an abbreviated pattern because I'm a little bit lower on the downwind. I like to be about 1,500 feet midfield, but you'll see I'm about 1,300 feet midfield above sea level. So I'm going to just make a nice tight pattern. I just briefly check my spoilers and they do work. I'm looking out for traffic. Looking out. We're not using the altimeter to figure out when we're going to turn. We look at the runway. We look at angles to the runway. I'm looking back. You can't see that when I get down toward the end of the runway. I'm looking back at the runway. And I'm going to use angles as a way to figure out whether I'm too high or I'm too low. It's all part of your training. Now that I'm focused on landing, I'm going to drop that nose and pick up the airspeed. We don't fly low and slow. The training is to get the airspeed up around 65, 70 miles an hour will work in a PW5. And I'm doing a nice tight pattern, as I can see right now. And another thing you can't see is I'm looking to the right to make sure there's no other gliders on a final approach. Definitely want to stay clear of traffic. Alright, I'm going to line it up on the runway. Looks like I've got about 50% spoilers out right now. I can see my left hand, you can see that. Now I've brought the spoilers back in. Alright, I'm bringing the spoilers back out now. Hold it off the ground as long as I can. Touch down, keep the wings level, continue to fly. Just because you're on the ground doesn't mean you're done with this. You've got to go to a full stop trying to keep those wings level as long as possible. And if the wing does touch the ground, stop immediately. Don't drag that wing if possible. And there you go. Woo. About 2 hours. Not bad for a day. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and be sure and look up my other YouTube videos. Everything about flying, from radio control to ultralights, even gliders and sailplanes. You guys have a great day, and we'll see you in the air next time. Bye-bye.